The Merged Egg. A Tale of Misunderstood Pans, A Mother's Outburst, and the Quiet Art of Rebuilding Family.Bonds. Clara hadn't been back to her parents' house in months, not since she'd moved to the city for her graphic design job. At 23, she was carving out her own life, a small apartment shared with two roommates who respected her space and her quirks. But the familiar creak of the front porch steps, the faint smell of lavender from her mother's garden, and the cluttered warmth of the kitchen brought her back to childhood, a place both comforting and confining. She was visiting for the weekend, a chance to catch up, maybe rebuild the bridge that had started to fray since she'd left home. It was Saturday morning, and the kitchen was bathed in soft sunlight filtering through the lace curtains. Clara's mother, Ellen, was at the counter, slicing tomatoes with the same precision she'd always had, her movements quick but deliberate. Clara's father, Tom, was in the living room, half hidden behind a newspaper, the rustle of pages a steady backdrop. Clara stood at the stove, a frying pan heating on the burner, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who'd learned to cook for herself. "I'm making a fried egg," Clara said, glancing at her mom. "Want one?" Ellen looked up, her face softening. "Sure, hon. That sounds nice." Clara nodded, reaching for the carton of eggs. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the cardboard. "I can use 2 pans, she said casually. "I don't know how you like your eggs these days." It was a small thing, a practical suggestion. Clara hadn't lived at home in over a year, and she remembered her mom only recently starting to eat eggs for breakfast. She didn't want to mess up something as simple as an egg, not when she was trying to keep the morning light. Ellen waved a hand, dismissing the idea with a smile that felt a little tight. "No need for that. 1 pan's fine. Just crack mine in." Clara shrugged, not thinking much of it. She cracked her egg into the pan, the yolk bright and whole, sizzling softly. Ellen stepped over, cracking her own egg beside it. "Sunny side up, medium," she said, her tone clipped but not unkind. Clara nodded, adjusting the heat. "Got it." She stepped away for a moment to grab a spatula from the drawer across the kitchen. It was only a minute, maybe less, but when she returned, she stopped short. The 2 eggs had run together, their edges blurring into a single, misshapen mass. The yolks were still distinct, but the whites had merged, creating something neither of them had intended. Clara tilted her head, a small laugh escaping her. "Oh, look," she said, her voice neutral, almost curious. "The eggs have merged into one." She hadn't meant anything by it, no judgment, no complaint, just an observation, like pointing out a cloud shaped like a starship. But Ellen's face changed in an instant. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. She set the knife down with a clatter, the sound sharp in the quiet kitchen. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ellen snapped, her voice rising. "You can't even share a pan? You're so selfish, Clara. Always have to have everything your way, don't you? A loner, shutting everyone out." Clara froze, the spatula dangling in her hand. The words hit like a slap, each one stinging more than the last. Selfish? A loner? She opened her mouth to respond, to explain she'd only suggested 2 pans to get it right, but her throat tightened. The kitchen, warm and familiar moments ago, felt like a trap. She glanced at her father, hoping for a lifeline. Tom lowered his newspaper, his expression weary. "A little quieter, Ellen," he said softly, then went back to reading, as if the outburst were just a passing storm. Ellen turned away, slamming the tomato slices onto a plate and storming to the dining room. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint sizzle of the merged egg in the pan. Clara stood there, her chest tight, her eyes burning. She didn't understand. It was just an egg, just a comment. How had it turned into this? She flipped the egg onto a plate, her hands shaking, and left it on the counter. Her appetite was gone. She retreated to her old bedroom upstairs, closing the door softly, as if loud noises might shatter her further. Sitting on the edge of her bed, surrounded by faded posters of spaceships and constellations, she let the tears come. They weren't loud sobs, just quiet, confused drops that fell onto her jeans. She replayed the moment in her mind, the suggestion, the merged egg, her neutral comment. Where had she gone wrong? Was it really about the egg, or was there something deeper, something she'd missed? Clara thought about her life in the city, sharing an apartment with roommates who didn't mind her quirks. She'd learned to compromise, to wash dishes that weren't hers, to laugh off small annoyances. She wasn't selfish, wasn't a loner. But her mother's words echoed, digging into old wounds, moments when Ellen had called her too independent as a teen, or when she'd felt judged for wanting space. Was that what this was? A resentment she hadn't seen coming? By noon, Ellen still hadn't spoken to her. Clara stayed in her room, sketching aimlessly in her notebook, a starship, its hull cracked like her morning. Her father knocked once, offering a tentative, "You okay, kiddo?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He didn't mention the outburst, didn't bridge the gap. Clara wondered why he stayed silent, why he always let Ellen's storms pass without intervening. Was he avoiding conflict, or did he think she could handle it? That afternoon, Clara ventured downstairs, hoping to clear the air. Ellen was in the garden, pulling weeds with a ferocity that matched her earlier outburst. Clara took a deep breath and stepped outside, the summer air warm on her skin. "Mom," she said, her voice steady but soft. "Can we talk?" Ellen didn't look up, her hands buried in the soil. "What's there to talk about?" Clara swallowed, choosing her words carefully. "I didn't mean to upset you. I suggested 2 pans because I didn't know how you liked your eggs. I wasn't trying to control anything." Ellen's hand stilled, but she didn't turn. "It's not about the pans, Clara," she said, her voice quieter now, but laced with something raw. "It's about you pulling away. Ever since you moved out, it's like you don't need us. You come back, and it's all separate. Your pans, your life." Clara's heart sank. She hadn't realized her independence felt like distance to her mother. "I'm not pulling away," she said, her voice cracking. I wanted to make you a good breakfast. I didn't know it would hurt you." Ellen finally looked at her, her eyes softening but still guarded. "I overreacted," she admitted, brushing dirt off her hands. "It's just. You're so grown now. I miss when you needed me." Clara nodded, tears prickling again, but not from hurt this time. "I still need you, Mom. Just differently." They stood there, the garden a quiet buffer between them. It wasn't a full resolution, but it was a start. Ellen offered a small smile, gesturing to the house. "Come on. Let's try those eggs again. 1 pan's fine." Clara laughed, a shaky sound, and followed her inside. They cooked together, the eggs staying separate this time, and though the air wasn't entirely clear, it was lighter. Clara's father looked up from his newspaper, giving her a nod, his silence a familiar shield but not unkind. Over the rest of the weekend, Clara and Ellen found a tentative rhythm. They talked about small things, Clara's job, Ellen's garden, avoiding the deeper currents for now. Clara realized her mother's outburst wasn't about eggs or pans but about the fear of losing connection, a fear Clara hadn't seen until it spilled over. She didn't stand up to her mother in the moment, but she didn't need to. Her quiet approach, her willingness to listen, had been enough. As Clara drove back to the city, her sketchbook on the passenger seat, she felt a mix of relief and clarity. The merged egg had been a small thing, but it had cracked open something bigger, a reminder that love could be messy, that misunderstandings could hurt, but that bridges could be rebuilt, one careful word at a time. She glanced at her sketch of the starship, its hull no longer cracked but soaring, and smiled. She'd be back next weekend, ready to try again. Clara woke on Sunday morning to the quiet hum of her parents' house, the familiar creak of the floorboards underfoot as she padded downstairs. The air still carried the faint sting of yesterday's argument, but the garden conversation with her mother, Ellen, had left a fragile truce. Clara wanted to hold on to that, maybe build on it. She wasn't sure how, but she felt a pull to try, to bridge the gap that had widened since she'd moved to the city. The kitchen, bathed in soft morning light, felt like the place to start. Ellen was already there, stirring a pot of oatmeal, her movements slower than the frenetic weed pulling of the previous day. Clara's father, Tom, sat at the dining table, his newspaper folded beside a mug of coffee. Clara hesitated in the doorway, her sketchbook tucked under her arm like a shield. She'd spent the night sketching, a starship with a cracked hull, now mended with glowing lines, a quiet reflection of her hope for today. "Morning," Clara said, her voice cautious but warm. Ellen glanced up, her smile small but genuine. "Morning, Han. Oatmeal?" Clara nodded, setting her sketchbook on the counter. "Sounds good. Want help?" Ellen's eyes softened, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Sure. Grab the berries from the fridge." Clara moved to the refrigerator, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't about berries or oatmeal, it was about showing up, about not letting yesterday's hurt define the weekend. She rinsed the blueberries, her hands steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. She wanted to ask about the outburst, to understand why her mother had called her selfish, but the words felt too heavy for the morning's fragile peace. As they worked side by side, the kitchen filled with the gentle clink of spoons and the sweet smell of simmering oats. Tom looked up from his coffee, his expression unreadable but not distant. You two making a feast? He asked, a hint of a smile in his voice. Clara grinned, seizing the chance to lighten the mood. Only if you count berries as gourmet. Ellen chuckled, a sound that eased the tension in Clara's shoulders. They sat to eat, the three of them around the small dining table, the silence punctuated by small talk, Ellen's garden plans, Clara's latest design project, Tom's grumbling about a new neighbor's noisy dog. It felt almost normal, but Clara couldn't shake the memory of her mother's words, selfish, loner. They lingered like a bruise, tender to the touch. After breakfast, Clara offered to wash the dishes, a small gesture she hoped might keep the peace. Ellen joined her, drying the bowls with a checkered towel. The rhythm of their work was soothing, but Clara sensed an undercurrent, a question neither had voiced. She took a breath, deciding to test the waters. Mom, she said, scrubbing a spoon, yesterday. I'm still kind of confused. I didn't mean to upset you with the egg thing. Was it really about the pans? Ellen's hands paused, the towel still in her grip. She didn't look at Clara, her eyes fixed on the bowl she was drying. I told you, it wasn't the pans, she said quietly. It's hard, Clara. You're out there, living your life, and I'm proud of you. But sometimes it feels like you don't need me anymore. Like I'm just background. Clara set the sponge down, turning to face her mother. That's not true. I need you. I'm figuring out how to be me, you know? Moving out, the city, it's not about leaving you behind. It's about building something. Ellen nodded, her lips pressing together. I know. But when you suggested 2 pans, it felt like you didn't want to share anything with me. Not even a moment. Clara's chest tightened. She hadn't seen it that way, hadn't realized her practical suggestion could feel like rejection. I just wanted to get your egg right, she said, her voice soft. I didn't know it would feel like that. Ellen met her eyes, her expression a mix of regret and relief. I shouldn't have yelled. Calling you those things. That was wrong. I was Alvo. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling. Clara wanted to say more, to ask why her mother's fears had spilled into such harsh words, but she sensed it wasn't the time. Instead, she dried her hands and hugged Ellen, a brief, awkward embrace that felt like a step forward. That afternoon, Clara found her father in the garage, tinkering with an old radio. Tom wasn't much for deep talks, but his quiet presence was a comfort. She sat on a stool, watching him fiddle with wires, a sci-fi novel open beside her. Dad, she said, hesitating. Yesterday, when Mom got upset. You didn't say much. Why? Tom looked up, his hand stilling. I didn't know what to say, kiddo. Your mom gets like that sometimes, carries a lot inside, then it comes out wrong. I thought it'd blow over. Clara nodded, understanding but still stung. I just felt alone. Tom set the radio down, his eyes gentle. I'm sorry. I'm not good with those moments. But I'm here, okay? Always. It wasn't everything she needed, but it was enough. They spent the next hour talking about the radio, about her childhood obsession with sci-fi gadgets, and Clara felt a spark of connection, like a circuit coming to life. As she packed to return to the city, Clara left her sketchbook open on the kitchen table, the starship drawing visible. Ellen picked it up, tracing the glowing lines. This is beautiful, she said. Like something from one of your old stories. Clara smiled, a warmth spreading through her. Maybe we can make up a new story next time I'm home. Ellen nodded, her eyes bright. I'd like that. Driving back to the city, Clara felt lighter. The merged egg had cracked open something painful, but it had also forced a conversation, a chance to see her mother's fears and her father's quiet support. Her family wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and she was learning to navigate its orbit, one careful moment at a time. Clara's next visit to her parents' house came 2 weeks later, the late July air thick with the hum of cicadas. The drive from the city felt shorter this time, her anticipation tempered by a cautious hope. The garden conversation with her mother, Ellen, had cracked open a door, but Clara knew doors could swing shut again. She wanted to keep it open, to find a way to connect without the weight of misunderstanding. Her sketchbook, tucked in her bag, held a new drawing, a starship orbiting a planet, its path steady but not without turbulence, a quiet metaphor for her family. The house was the same as ever, lavender in the air, creaky porch steps, the faint rustle of her father's newspaper from the living room. Ellen was in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread, her hands dusted with flour. Clara paused in the doorway, her heart a mix of warmth and wariness. She'd spent the past weeks replaying the merged egg incident, her mother's harsh words, selfish, loner, and her father's silence. She'd also thought about Ellen's confession, the fear of being left behind, and Tom's quiet apology in the garage. This visit, she decided, would be about building, not breaking. "Morning, Mom," Clara said, setting her bag on the counter. "That bread smells amazing already." Ellen looked up, her smile hesitant but warm. "Thanks, hon. Want to help shape the loaves?" Clara nodded, rolling up her sleeves. They worked in companionable silence, the rhythm of kneading and shaping a gentle anchor. Clara glanced at her mother, noting the lines around her eyes, softer in the morning light. She wanted to ask about the outburst again, to dig deeper into the hurt, but she chose a lighter path instead. "Remember when we used to make cookies?" Clara said, pressing dough into a loaf pan. "I'd sneak extra chocolate chips and you'd pretend not to notice." Ellen laughed, a sound that eased the knot in Clara's chest. "You were terrible at sneaking. I'd find crumbs all over your shirt." They shared a smile, the memory a small bridge. Clara took a breath, deciding to test the waters. "Mom, I've been thinking about last time. I'm glad we talked, but I'm still kind of hurt. The things you said, about me being selfish, it didn't feel fair." Ellen's hand slowed, her fingers lingering on the dough. She didn't meet Clara's eyes, but her voice was steady. "I know. I was wrong to say those things. It's just, when you moved out, it felt like you were gone for good. I got scared, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry, Clara." Clara nodded, her throat tight. "I get it. I just want us to be okay. I don't want to feel like I'm walking on eggshells." Ellen's lips twitched, a hint of humor breaking through. "Bad pun, hon." Clara grinned, relieved. "Had to try." They finished the bread, sliding the loaves into the oven, and Clara felt a shift, not a full resolution, but a step toward understanding. She glanced at her father, Tom, now in the kitchen refilling his coffee. He'd been quiet again, his usual retreat, but Clara wasn't ready to let it slide this time. "Dad," she said, wiping flour off her hands, "can we talk for a sec?" Tom raised an eyebrow, setting his mug down. "Sure, kiddo. What's up?" Clara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Last time, when Mom got upset, you didn't say much. I felt kind of alone. I know you don't like conflict, but I could have used you in my corner." Tom's face softened, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "You were right. I've always stayed out of the way when your mom gets worked up. Thought it was easier. But I didn't mean to leave you hanging. I'll do better." Clara nodded, a weight lifting. "Thanks, Dad. I just need to know you're there." He reached out, squeezing her shoulder. "I am. Always." The rest of the day felt lighter. They ate lunch together, the bread warm and crusty, and Clara showed Ellen her latest sketch, a starship with glowing lines, orbiting a planet dotted with lavender fields. "It's kind of like us," Clara said, half joking. "Different paths, but still connected." Ellen studied the drawing, her eyes bright. "It's beautiful. You should frame it for us." Clara smiled, the idea sparking something warm. "Deal. But you're picking the frame." That afternoon, they walked through the garden, Ellen pointing out new blooms, Clara listening with genuine interest. Tom joined them, carrying a tray of lemonade, and for the first time in a while, Clara felt like they were a unit, not perfect, but trying. The merged egg, the harsh words, the silence, they were cracks, not fractures. Families, she realized, were like her starship sketches, flawed, but capable of repair. As she drove back to the city, her sketchbook open to the orbiting starship, Clara felt a quiet certainty. The hurt from her mother's words hadn't vanished, but it was softer now, overlaid with understanding. She'd come back again, maybe next weekend, with new sketches and new stories. The orbit was wide, but it held.